This next individual is a very dear friend of mine, and he's a magic person because he's really timeless. And he's also a poet laureate, which he more than deserves. He should be poet laureate of every county up here. He's also the seminal force of what has allowed the hubris of us to continue our desire to have the power of the word as an example of our expression. And, well, let him dazzle you himself. Robert Milby.
Thank you, Hayden. Good to see we have a few people sticking around. All right, just a few birthdays and death days from the past week. Going back to Sunday, which was the 9th of December, John Milton, born in England in 1608. Leonie Adams, born in 1899. And the 10th, perhaps you've heard of Emily Dickinson, born in 1830. Harry Crosby's death in New York City in 1929 at age 31. Carolyn Kaiser, born in 1925. Thomas Lux, 1946. The 11th, Hector Berlioz, born in 1803. Jim Harrison, 1937. Grace Paley, 1922. Alfred de Musset, now there's a French poet you should check out, 1810. The 12th, Gustave Flaubert, 1821. Robert Browning's death at age 77 in 1889. Edvard Munch, born in Norway in 1863. 13th, how about this? Heinrich Heine, born in Germany in 1797. The American poet Kenneth Patchen, born 1911. James Wright, another important American poet, born 1927. And it was yesterday that we lost the great Nancy Wilson, jazz singer, died at age 81. Some of you might remember Nancy Wilson.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, big loss.
Big loss.
Giant loss. Today we remember the birth of Aphra Behn, born in 1640 in England. What a story she had. Paul Éluard, born in 1895 in France. And she won the lottery herself. Shirley Jackson's birth in 1919. On a haunted hill. Here's one by Emily Dickinson. I think this is one of the most beautiful winter poems that she's written. It sifts from leaden sieves. It powders all the wood. It fills with alabaster wool the wrinkles of the road. It makes an even face of mountain and of plain, unbroken forehead from the east unto the east again. It reaches to the fence. It wraps it rail by rail, till it is lost in fleeces. It deals celestial veil. To stump and stack and stem, a summer's empty room, acres of joints where harvests were, recordless but for them. It ruffles wrists of posts as ankles of a queen, then stills its artisans like ghosts, denying they have been. Emily Dickinson. She was actually rather funny. So one day, there's a knock upon the door of her father's house where she resided her entire life, except for a brief respite at Mount Holyoke, which was a private school at that time. And this is when she was an adult. She hears the knock upon the door. She walks out to the porch, up to the door, and there's an elderly woman standing at the door. And she says, "I'd like to inquire about the property over there, some acreage, perhaps a field. And then Emily Dickinson reportedly said, "Shouldn't you be interested in the property over there?" And it was a cemetery. Talk about ageist, right? A lot of stories about the great poets. Here's one by Harry Crosby. Sun Rhapsody. The sun, a fish in the aquarium of sky, or golden net to snare the butterfly of soul, or else the hole through which the stars have disappeared. It is a forest without trees. It is a lion in a cage of breeze. It is the roundness of her knees, great Hercules, and all the seas and our soliloquies. Winter cold anchorite, summer hot sybarite. Today a lady wrapped in clouds, tomorrow hunted by the hungry clouds. It is a monster that our thoughts have speared, the queen we chanticleered. A mother's womb, a child's balloon, red burning tomb. Harry Crosby. And by the way, he was writing around the time of Hart Crane, so we're talking the 1920s. Water lilies. Unwedded from the world, I stray through trees to where a pool lies mirrored in the sun, a disk of polished gold that I have won with labors not unknown to Hercules. Slender they bathe, all naked as a breeze, their nipples hollow and their hair undone, while from their widespread thighs cool ripples run to rock the water lilies round their knees. Nymphs of the fountains, naiads innocent, frail sunbeams who have passed between my arms, so beautiful in your imprisonment, fill now my soul with symbols of delight, soft voices and soft fingers and soft charms, and the perfume of the lotus in the night. Harry Crosby. He was born in early June 1898. He fought in the Great War, which of course is World War I. And he disgraced his family with his libertine ways. Really fascinating story about Harry Crosby. All right, here's a few of mine, and then we'll disappear. Just ask E.E. Cummings, right? This one is for the Hudson River. Remnants. Irony is a thick remnant of factory lying near the frozen Hudson River. Wolf moon glowing, ice, bridge singing winter ghost songs. Ironmongers, brickmakers, carriage crafters, wheelwrights at work in gray skeletal building, no staff. Ship fragments tapping on old glacial ice, rising from world's end. The green banks held the greatest currency, once indigenous footpaths, now snow-flowered railroad steel and creosote caskets, pointing sunrise to sunset. Saugerties Lighthouse stands, a storyteller, a log keeper, as the frozen driftwood once beech, once willow, lay in state, with no mourners, no visitation but wind dirge, remnants of the massive chain, memoirs of sunken boats, lost corpses, mere shards of life yarns, years and seasons sinking and rising, sunrise to sunset, remnants of tradition replaced with no remonstrance but frenetic commerce, orchestrated on a new and aberrant proscenium. The Hudson owns a fine collection of antiques, bird bones, mute human skulls, coyote pelts, car motors, steamer trunk of mouldered Gilded Age photos, rusted bird cage, a picnic table dislodged from mountain laurel branches, floating as spirits lunch, seated at the estuary softened benches. Gray ghosts watch from redoubts and rooftops of the granite city, south of Newburgh, north of Highland Falls. rib cage dressed in old flannel exhumed from a tributary trench, vulcanized tires carried in wet plastic palsies of bags and bottles. They tread in quiet winter meditation, worship of a lost grandfather's clock, another passive victim of automation. Vultures and seagulls squat on the roof of the Bear Mountain toll booth and suspension cables, queued for a view of Hudson's fragments at dawn, when the bridge conducts its concerto of sleet upon cold and dumb metal as cars and trucks pay for the privilege to drive above a museum they'll never patronize. How can you not write about the great Hudson River? All right, I have a manuscript of poems about the great classical composers in the Western canon. Here's two, and the first one, just a quick note. Mozart had a problem with loud noises, and anytime people would slam doors, he would get quite upset. So this begins with a quotation from Mozart himself. Music, in even the most terrible situations, must never offend the ear, but always remain a source of pleasure. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Slamming doors around Mozart. It didn't just jar him, it changed the order of his day. Snow followed him home. The tavern's glow could not keep the maestro content with beer and flesh autographs, not because of sonatas or string quartets, a chamber with a high fire in an adulterous hearth, blankets and sweets, perfumes not of Constance. He shook many a proper hand, lodge affiliates, patrons notwithstanding. He retreated to the room where inspiration spread her seraphic wings, fingers inked in proof of scores, magnum opus, until the Fraulein slammed the door. He shook, he reeled, tossed the ink pot in the fire, ripped the parchment to minutiae. Crude slangs of outrageous fortune, genteel salon talk forgotten, the doors, the windows and shutters to be closed gently, the touch of a child upon the knob, a breeze across his desk and brow to rouse him from sleep. No, a bull goring, a horse kicking, a cart crashing into a tree, slamming doors to destroy the quintet, the love letter, the quartet painted in mere hours before dinner. She had but one chance left, or the sack, and home to penance at the peasant's cottage. Herr Mozart tore the curtains down, his face contorted in a madness only the muse could sanction. Constance? Nay. Nannerl? Yes. His offended ears covered in a fit of childish rage. His older sister was over 100 miles away. Mozart's idol had become another's idol. She was a mother. Salzburg could not hold the genius. This youngest of 7, father of 6, he had the door left open. Snow covered the entrance hall, the snows of quiet December. Oh, he died on December the 5th, 1791. Wow. There's a mystery about that. This is based on one of Beethoven's sonatas. This is his 9th piano sonata. Beethoven's 9th sonata. The piano sonata is autumn leaves, dyed in sound, chasing each other like giddy school children down a blustery country lane. The leaves dislodge from the keyboard tree, headlong to a path of afternoon wind play. Orange and ruddy rustics carry softer yellows along, coaxing those still younger greens with red freckles and wild opinions. Yet, when gray brushes brood into later tones of day, colder hues call the leaves over frost-dressed stone walls, beyond harvest-abandoned fields and shadowed wells, quieting pliant faces to discs of ice. Now winter's recital intones solitude, notes hung like breath garlands above the gloom, speaking in rustled pages, keys of frost and snow outside the desolate hall. I write a lot about Beethoven. His birthday is this coming Sunday, the 16th. This is a short one, and I suppose that some of my greatest fans, the academics, love this one. Epic on a matchbook. Strike the coarse, stark poem. Kick it, slap it, punch it, lick its skin, and drag your ragged nails across the blackboard visage, ablaze, away from the melted malaise of clean-cut academics, limp, wet branches, and paycheck-high holy days. A glaze over their coiffed lecterns, laptops, and Pulitzer glances. Yours is a fire folly with fear perfume of kerosene, a light, a fright, a fire late in the night, no wine to wind the brain clock gears back into scholarly obeisance. Your poem has bonfires as its cult following, watchfires atop the snow crags and ice caves where Roman heads rest on lances, while below, in the sad wreck of their gray city, adjunct drunks weep in their sleep, dreaming of your tribal dances.
Get it.
Thank you. All right, my last one before I am shot for treason against the muse. Well, all right, for those of you who have read the great Boris Pasternak, his poetry and his great novel, Dr. Zhivago, I hope you have, and if you haven't, I hope you shall. So if Julie Christie could be Lara, so could Keira Knightley in 2002. Solstice meditation. The winter wind is my howling wolf, under deceitful moonlight, outside the cottage calling Yuri and frightening Lara. The wind gathers wolf pack, sweeping frost dust from snowpack with a large gray broom against rhymed panes, while within the poet scratches papers of his consternation, never sated after delighting his mistress. The stark man heeds these growls of wolf moon, captured goddess of the frozen steppes. Pine boughs aged in hoarfrost lean close to whisper of this exile. I have been Zhivago in my younger role, tossing the dice of career at wolves, and I have held nearly a dozen Laras as they held my cranial heart captive in a shared secret cottage, each of them disappearing on a train with the child of our inspiration. I am left with frozen ink pot, iced pen, papers gust snatched from my cold hands and barren desk, through the open window, strewn over snow-swept steps. The north wind makes wolves of snowstorms. Thank you.